Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to talk about Peter Hook's book, Unknown Pleasures Inside Joy Division. Um, for those of you who don't know, Joy Division was a post-punk band in the late 70s to 1980. New Order span out of Joy Division. Um, so, yeah, there's that. But before we get into the review of the book, as always, please like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you know when new videos come on out. Especially ones like these. If you like books on music or biographies or philosophy or literature, I do a lot of sci-fi and fantasy, but I do this kind of stuff in there as well. So um, yeah, and spread the word. It's free for you. It helps me out. And I appreciate it. And leave a comment down below. I love hearing from you guys. So, going into this book, there was one thing that kind of worried me that I was reluctant with. And that was that there was going to be a lot of harsh vitriol against Bernard Sumner from Peter Hook. Because if you are a Joy Division fan and a New Order fan, you know that the two of them clashed a lot. And basically it was the reason that clashing was the reason why New Order basically split, was because there was basically no working together anymore. But there wasn't a whole lot of that. I mean, there's bits where he talks about, things that he disagreed with Bernard Sumner, or things that Bernard Sumner may have done that weren't really cool. Um, and it's sort of how you see that relationship starting to go down. It's starting to basically fizzle away, which happens later in during New Order. Um, but in the end, I mean, there's a lot in this in this book that does not make it into the documentary. Um, I read a review on Goodreads, and again, I try not to let Goodreads bother me because the person was like, "Well, this isn't gonna, this isn't this is not an intelligent document of Joy Division." And for those of you who have watched the documentary, you will know how Peter Hook talks. You will know how they all talk. Very British, a whole lot of swearing. So if the bad words, if that turns you off, then stay away from this book because there's a whole lot of them in here. But it's very British. That's the way they talked. It's the way they still talk. Um, so you kind of have to wrap your head around that. I mean, if you want to get an intelligent view of Joy Division, you got to go to a scholar who wasn't necessarily inside the band. So then you got to ask, how accurate would that be? Um, so that being said, I thought it was cool that he was himself. It wasn't gonna, basically he says it in the very beginning. I'm not gonna apologize. This is me, and this is my book. So I appreciated that. Um, the things that were interesting, the fact that he says Ian was a people pleaser. Depending on who he would hang out with would depend on which Ian you got. If he was with the band and they were playing, you got the Ian stage persona, the persona everybody knows, the one who's channeling the music and putting his all into everything. Um, if he was just hanging out with the boys, drinking pints and smoking cigarettes and peeing in ashtrays and the things that musicians do, not really the Ian myth, but stuff that happened, looking at, as he says, turds in a toilet. Not part of the Ian myth, but yet there it is. Or if he was hanging out with, say, his intelligent people, Anik and Genesis P. Orge of Throbbing Gristle, he would become the intelligent poet aesthete. So in the and Debbie, I guess Debbie Curtis would have the best version of how he was at home in her book Touching from a Distance, which I would recommend reading if you have not. It's a good book, even though the slant is more her direction. Obviously, she was the one that ended up getting cheated on, even though, interesting enough, Peter Hook says he can almost guarantee you that Ian and Anique never consummated the friendship. And he says, this is how I know why. He was on so many medications that the side effects would have made it almost impossible for him to physically perform in that way. So they were romantic. They were, you could say, lovers, but they never fulfilled the act. They never fulfilled the consummation of the relationship. Not to say that Debbie's jealousy over it and the pending divorce that followed wasn't justifiable, because it was. But for years, Anique tried to argue before she died that look, we slept in the same bed, and that's about it. We didn't do anything more than that. And Peter Hook is basically saying, yeah, she's right, because he couldn't. Again, maybe not part of the Ian myth, but there you go. Um, Peter Hook says the theme of this book, or the title of the book, really should have been "I'm okay, let's keep going on." Because every time Ian would have a seizure, and the band would say, "Nope, let's call the gig," he would say, "Nope, let's finish it. I'm good, let's go." Or they would say, "We need to cancel some gigs. You're tired. You need a break." "Nope, let's keep going. I'm good. Let's just keep going." So Ian pushed himself as much as he pushed the band. And in the documentary, you have people asking themselves, why didn't we stop? Why didn't we just stop? Well, according to Peter Hook, they did. I mean, they stopped in April, getting ready for the American tour. They canceled a lot of dates. They didn't do anything. And Peter Hook says maybe that was the fact, was what played into it. When he was on the road, he was away from the home life and the home stresses, and he was doing the thing that he really loved to do. Yes, he was having seizures every night on stage, which you don't hear in the documentary, where he basically either would go straight down or he'd go crashing into the drum set. So the epilepsy was getting worse. But Peter Hook says maybe, and he says, well, not maybe, but he says if we could have gotten him to the United States, he would have survived. He would have lived. But here's, I guess, the problem is, you know, you're 22 years old. You are in a rock band who is up and coming. People are really starting to like your group, and they're really starting to like you. But now here comes the downside. Every time you play a show, the lighting, the strobe lights can cause you to have a seizure. And it happened more nights than not, according to Peter Hook. 3, you have feelings for 2 women, one of which you're married to and you have a daughter. And that woman is got a divorce pending on you. 4, Ian did not really like touring. He liked playing live, but didn't so much like the touring. So even though he seemed like Peter Hook would say, we'd be in the car and he would be they'd be jumping up and down in the seat, going, yeah, we're going to America. But then he would tell Genesis P. Orge, presumably, and how much you want to take what Genesis P. Orge or Throbbing Gristle has to say. I mean, I read Cozy's book on him. I don't know if he's a reliable source, but Genesis P. Orge would say, well, he didn't want to tour. He didn't want to go to America. He wanted out. He wanted to open a bookstore. He wanted to start a side band with me. True or not, I don't know. But it's what Peter Hook puts in there. Also, just the fact that he, is around all of these stressors and he's that young, and you find the thing that you love to do. You love to play music. You love to play in front of people. You pour your heart and your soul into every song, into every performance, only to have it sort of taken away by somebody saying, you know what, you can have this, but at some point you're going to flop down on stage tonight, and the band's going to have to hold you down and make sure you don't swallow your tongue and kill yourself. It's a lot. Now, does that justify what Ian does? And I mean, any Joy Division fan knows what Ian did. For those of you who don't are not really Joy Division fans or don't really know the history, is on the weekend before the band was supposed to go on their American tour, and it was going to be with Cabaret Voltaire, one of my all-time faves. Would have been a great bill. I mean, I would have been too young for it, but it would have been a great billing, I think. Um, it was on I believe, a Saturday night, and he got in an argument with Debbie. Debbie went off to work or somewhere, and when she came back, he had hung himself from the kitchen clothes rack, and he was basically on his knees, and he was dead. And Peter Hook, I think he says another interesting point is that there were so many Ians. There was an Ian for here and an Ian for here, there were multiple Ians. And his theory is one thing that he says is that there were so many Ians that maybe even Ian didn't know who the real Ian was. How is that not an intellectual viewpoint? It's a question. It's a very valid question. Um, and I think the other thing, and this is in the documentary as well, but he says, writing songs in as Joy Division, he said was easy. It was super easy. We never had to record anything. Like as we were rehearsing it, as we jammed, we didn't have to record. He said Ian was our ear. He knew when Bernard was playing right, when I was hitting the high notes, when that was sounding right. We didn't have to record anything. We didn't have to record any demos until like the end when you had like In a Lonely Place. There was like a session of that. Um, but he's like, we didn't have to record. Ian was our ear. We went off of him. We played, he came up with the lyrics, and we went. And that's the other thing. A lot of people ask, how can you not know what your lead singer is singing? How can you not know what the lyrics are? And Peter Hook, obviously, hindsight is 2020's. I wish I would have been listening and paying attention. He's like, but he said we were all busy trying to do our bit. So he was, focused in on doing the bass, and Bernard Sumner was focusing in on his guitar or keyboard parts. Stephen Morris was on the drums and focusing on his part. And when you're recording an album, the music's done first. The band goes in, at least in this case, the band goes in, they cut the music. After that, then the vocals are laid down. So then Ian goes in and does the vocals, and the band's not there. And in concert, again, I'm going to assume that that's what Peter Hook was saying. We were so busy about just doing our bit, and we knew he was nailing it. We didn't really need to pay attention. And he's like, I wish I would have. But that's why there was only really one person who picked up on all of it, and that's if you go to the documentary, and that's Anique. She goes to Tony Wilson during the recording of Closer and says, "Look, this record's dark, and Ian's got a lot of dark lyrics here, and he's when he says I take the blame, he means it." And Tony Wilson says, "No, no, 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 it's just art." And he says, "How effing stupid can you be?" Because if you pay attention to the lyrics, it's a tortured soul crying for help. So the other nice thing with this book is you basically have pretty much all the gigs that they played as Warsaw, that they played as Joy Division, and a lot of them have the set lists, so you can kind of see how the set lists evolved over time. Um, Also, the different sessions that where they recorded stuff, because yes, there were only two albums, Unknown Pleasures and Closer, but there were so many things that they recorded that didn't get released, or they were singles and they didn't put singles on their albums. So you had to have an album like Substance that collected Atmosphere and Love Will Tear Us Apart and Transmission, the singles, the stuff that they said we were just too above putting single art, the singles that we already did on an album. We didn't do that. So there's that. So it's very detailed. There's some cool pictures and there's some funny pictures. Um, I, I just think Peter Hook is a fun guy. He's fun to listen to. He's fun to read, and I recommend it. I gave it 5 stars. I'm looking forward. I'm gonna read his Hacienda, How Not to Run a Nightclub, and I'm also gonna read The Substance Inside New Order. Even though I'm gonna go into that one with some trepidation about him and his relationship with Bernard Sumner, because I have a feeling that's where the vitriol is gonna be. But gonna check it out, test it, and see. But that'll be coming. But yeah, I gave this 5 stars. If you're a Joy Division fan, if you're a New Order fan, read this if you have not. There's a lot in here that is not on the documentary, um, and it just there's too much for me to go over. I'm sitting here at 16 minutes and 40 seconds, and there's a lot that I didn't talk about that's in the book. So check it out. I think it's good. 5 stars. Yeah. So as always, please like. Oh, and poll question. Leave a comment down below. The all encompassing question: who do you like better, Joy Division or New Order? That is the all time question. I will put my answer down after some of you do because I don't want to influence anybody. But who is your favorite, or who do you not favorite, but who do you enjoy more, Joy Division or New Order? Leave that comment down below. I'd love to see what you guys have to say on it. So yeah, again, as always, please like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you know when new videos like this come on out. Leave a comment down below. Again, Joy Division or New Order, or maybe both if you can't really choose, or if it's if it's one band at one time and I'm in a different mood and it's this band, it's New Order then. You know, I'd love to see what you guys have to say. So with that, until next time, as always, keep YouTube literate